Welcome to this interview of Bria Goeller and Gorden Jones, who created this image. It's called That Little Girl Was Me. It's of Kamala Harris, and the shadow is Ruby Bridges, and it harkens back to a piece by Norman Rockwell called The Problem We All Live With. Norman Rockwell was a very famous illustrator and did many magazine covers, but also works of art. And he did not shy away from doing images that dealt with, black and white issues in the United States. Here's another piece of his called New Kids in the Neighborhood. So we can see how Bria and Gorden sort of are connecting with some art history through Norman Rockwell and the new image, That Little Girl Was Me. I had a chance to email Bria and make a connection, and she agreed to do an interview with me. And all of the questions that I'm asking this, at least most of the questions, were created by my advanced art students at Vernon Malone High School in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm very proud of the work they put into this to come up with some really interesting questions, which I think you will see prompted some really good responses and dug into this image and contemporary art as a whole. So I'm going to continue with the interview. The sound quality here is a little bit better because I have my microphone on. We use the Google Meet application to do the interview, so the resolution won't be quite as good, but the sound quality is decent. If you'd like some more information about them, I will have a website linked below and additional information where you can get connected with the artists, their work, and learn a little bit more. So without further ado, we're going to start the interview now.
So good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
All right, so we've got Bria Goeller and Gorden Jones, and from goodtrouble.com, right?
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I was struck by the image. I actually got tears in my eyes when I saw it because I recognized, the Ruby Bridges outline and Kamala and what she was doing for people, and it reminded me of back when Obama won the election the first time, and I recognized in my African American students how they walked with more pride in their step and really stepped up, and it really pervaded everything, and I noticed that, and it was palpable. Particularly with Kamala Harris getting in, I could see that with my young African American students, particularly the girls, were so proud of that moment. When we shared the image, they were just like, "Oh, I saw that, that was so cool," and they knew who Ruby Bridges was. I didn't have to do a whole primer on it, so they were definitely in touch. So that was awesome. So I thank you for taking your time out and talking to me and my students. They posed all of these questions. So I appreciate you giving us this opportunity for a little interview in your busy, busy day.
Yeah, of course.
So one of my students, Maya, asked, was art always your passion or dream?
Yeah, so definitely for me, I didn't know that I would be able to make a living out of it, but I was always doing art.
That's awesome. And then what made you start doing art? Zola asked.
Yeah, so this is actually an interesting story. And you teach high school students, right?
That's correct.
So yeah, so in high school, when I was ending high school, I was thinking about going to art school, and ultimately decided not to because Emory University, where I ended up going, was in a major metropolitan area in Atlanta, and I wanted to do a lot more social justice work than art. I figured, I could be an artist in a studio working and selling like paintings, whatever, but I could also be working with communities that really needed it. But in Atlanta and at Emory, they had this fantastic program, and I would highly encourage anyone who's about to graduate high school and looking at colleges to look into colleges that have like flexible, independent, interdisciplinary programs. Because I found that at Emory, and I ended up being able to, they didn't have an art department actually, which ended up being a weird like turn of events, but also kind of a blessing because I was able to independently pursue art while also doing social justice work through this independent program. And because I was one of the only artists, like graphic artists on campus, especially, I just, every single club needed some kind of graphic designer. And so that was where I really started to do it in the way that I'm doing it now, in like a marketable business way, where I was helping organizations, communicate through art and graphic design. And then I took a leap and moved to San Francisco in January and started to do the same thing because of COVID, actually, because I lost my other jobs and this was the one thing I could do from home. And it ended up working very nicely. And Gorden is part of the reason for that. And I have, my own design and art practice and lots of clients that I work with. And I didn't think it was possible, but that's sort of the brief summary of the journey that got me here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
My other student, Jackie, wanted to ask, like, it sounds like you did a lot on your own, self-learning and stuff. So what advice would you give a young artist to get better at their art?
Yeah, that's exactly. That question was also in my mind. Was just every step of the way, my family, some of my friends, people who didn't like, they were like, how on earth are you going to make a living out of that? Like, that's not realistic. It's just not. Like, you're naive and privileged to think that way. And I was terrified my whole life of being an artist. And I was like, oh no, I need to find some other way to like have a real job and then do art on the side. But I think my biggest advice would be just to, like, if you want something and you know that that's where your strengths are, like, if people say it all the time and it sounds so trite, but really, if you make up your mind and you're like, there's no other, this is what I'm going to do. And for me, COVID kind of made up my mind. I was like, well, I can't do anything else. But like, if you set your mind to it, and I did this in college too, where like there wasn't a major for what I wanted to do, but I created one anyway. And people meet you where you are and they see your passion. And I was able to fill some gaps in places where, people needed graphic stuff, contracted graphic work, and didn't want to hire an agency, so hired me instead. And I think that's where Gorden was at too. And so I just would recommend looking out for opportunities that match who you are and what you want to do, instead of trying to fit into pre-existing boxes, as silly as that sounds.
Excellent. No,
Yeah.
That makes total sense. And then following up, Chinaza, another one of my students, was asking, what do you think the most important part of creating art is?
So I think I have two different answers for this. One of them, just the art that I do in my own personal art practice, it's for me, and then sometimes I sell it, but is mostly for me. I would say with that, it's to just communicate, like use it as a way to communicate a story or communicate who you are or how you're feeling. And most of my independent art pieces are about connection and empathy and ways that people can learn to articulate themselves better, or it's me articulating something that I otherwise would have a hard time sharing, but use art as a way to do it. So that's sort of my approach. But I think in a working environment, as a working artist who's also an advocate and sort of an activist in a way, I think that is just the most important thing, is just to be a listener more than anything, and you'll hear more about Gorden and how this image came to be. But he came to me with the idea, and my one goal for all of the sort of professional things that I do, which is just using art as a way to help these social activists and social justice organizations do what they do, is to convey what they want through art. And so for me, the most important thing is just to be sort of like a fly on the wall in a way. Like, it's weird because I'm creating art and it is my creation, but I'm also like, it was Gorden's idea, and it's always my clients who have the last say, and I think they should, because ultimately it's their message. So in terms of like activist art, I think being receptive to what's happening in the world and being willing to use your art as a way to communicate that, instead of pushing your own ideals.
Yeah, it sounds very collaborative, which is something we try and push in our classrooms, working
Perfect.
together, getting feedback, going back and forth, and, revamping ideas. And yeah, that's awesome. Wesley was curious as to what media was used to make the image that we see here.
Yeah, so this one was a digital image. It's a Photoshop document. Some people think it's a painting, but I used a bunch of different composite images of, like, the wall was an image, Kamala's body was an image, her feet were a separate image, her hair was a separate, like everything was all sort of compiled together. And then I drew the shadow in Photoshop, like with my tablet and my brush. And so everything was digitally created for this one.
So it almost sounds like digital collage, I guess, through
A little bit, yeah.
that way. And that is that something you do a lot of in your practice as an artist?
Honestly, the stuff I do with Gorden is some of the only digital collage kind of stuff that I do, and I usually do a lot more work with it because design is usually around either creating images just freehand or working with text and sort of layout design. And then in my own practice, I do just all kinds of random things. So
Okay.
but Gorden is one of my only clients. I think that this is the real medium, but that's because there were other designers before me that was working with him, and that's sort of the route that they took with this. The first one was Muhammad Ali knocking out Trump, and so they had put images of Muhammad Ali and Donald Trump, and so I was working
Yeah.
with that theme.
I
Yeah.
would like to add, there was a gentleman I worked with. His name is Nate Tan. He's also a Bay Area artist, but he evolved from being a tagger. He's even mentioned in Banky Bank's book. So I started with an artist who was outside the box as a tagger, on subways and trains and walls and all that kind of
Absolutely.
stuff. Yeah.
Mm.
And so he was able to get what I wanted to do in the very beginning. Um, and then, I learned from him, and he took anything I said that came out of my brain and put it on. He said, "You want this?" I said, "Okay, yeah, that sounds cool." We made some changes and stuff. And then when I met Bria, and I knew I had to have an artist that also could think outside the box. So I went to Saran Norris, who's a very well recognized artist and animator in the Bay Area, because I've been watching his work since 2017. So I was trying to make contact with him, but he kept blowing me off. uh, but then one day I kind of forced myself upon him, and he invited me into his gallery and said, "Okay, I got a few minutes for you." And that's how Bria and I came. And when I sat down and met her, I said, I was actually kind of doing she didn't realize I was doing an interviewing process to see if she could think out of the box. But our symbiotic meeting and relationship that has evolved to now, um, she got it, and the historical content and what I wanted to convey to her that she can put on paper or canvas or whatever. So that's kind of how it came about.
That's
Yeah, I was
awesome.
working as Saran Norris is one of my clients too. So Saran sort of forwarded me to Gorden.
Okay. So there's a
Yeah.
community effort here.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
neat.
it's really nice. I like it.
Well, Ariana kind of asks about in the process of creating the image, were there any iterations that didn't quite make it to this final one? Were there other ideas kind of floating around, or even after you created it, are there more ideas floating in your head about iterations or changes to this piece?
I mean, yeah, definitely. There are actually 3 versions of it that we released. Only one of them went viral, but the other 2, one of them has 3 Kamalas walking. One of them is with Timberlands. The other one is with Converses. So Gorden really wanted to show, the duality, whatever the 3 version of duality is, of Kamala's personality. And then there's another
Swag.
one with
It's swag.
swag. And then there's another one with, she's part of the sorority group, and so we did a Divine Nine version of all of the Black sororities, and it was all spray painted on the walls and everything. So as she walked by, and then I have a couple. I have an idea that I haven't run by Gorden yet, so there might be something in the works. And I'm sure Gorden always has 1,000 ideas, so for sure. But yeah, there were a couple iterations, and we ended up with the one that we got.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. Because we're always telling students to work on a sketch, to try different iterations. And, that's what's really happening in the real world of artists. It isn't just one.
Oh, oh my God, absolutely. I go through, I mean, on average, sometimes it's like 2 or 3 versions, but on average, it's 7 to 14. Like there's always just working, because the more people you have involved too, the more opinions are there, and you have to sort of compromise towards the end. But yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Ariana also asked if you had any concerns about how the audience might perceive your work.
Yeah, so I'll let Gorden answer this too. I have been dealing a lot, and Gorden doesn't know this, I don't think as much, but with being a white woman and having a lot of people, a lot of, whether they're Black or not, a lot of people reaching out and having a problem with that. And sometimes people, don't do all their research and don't know that Gordon's involved too. And that's something that I've been trying to really push out and be like, this is a collaborative process. I'm an artist and I like try to translate voices that I think need to be heard. But it's been super difficult. Like I had 2 weeks ago I was a mess. I was avoiding interviews and I was like really trying to figure out how best to navigate that. And I think that was my biggest concern is just, I know that there are always, if art is provocative, there are going to be people that don't agree with it. And I've had a lot of people, like a lot of mentors tell me that, and just that it's, unavoidable, but it definitely wasn't easy. And I think it never is easy on the artist, and Gorden probably has his own, worries about it. But I think ultimately there are so many people that are reaching out and telling us their stories about how, especially you, and your students, and like how it affected them. And that's what I've been trying, especially in the past like week or so, to focus on and really read those rather than the other stuff.
Okay, cool. And
Yeah.
Philip kind of asks, if you are going to continue to make art that's similar to the piece that you created, and is that what continues to kind of inspire you, in that genre?
Yes, I mean, I think for Gorden, yes, for sure. I also have a lot of other clients that are communities of color that are pushing for similar, social justice issues. And so I think these themes will always come up because they're relevant and they always will be, and they're important. And I only work for people who I believe are doing really important and necessary things. I don't know if, Kamala and Ruby will be featured in the future, but that's I think in a broad term, yes, definitely still going to work on social justice.
Okay, yeah, Braden kind of has a follow-up question with that. It's do you have plans to continue drawing from prominent figures of color?
Yeah, so I mean, it just all depends on the people I meet and the people that like ask me and need help with stuff. And so I'm always here to translate whatever anyone needs. I think I'm careful on my own about doing that because I have to be. But I think if there's a need and I can help it get out there, then absolutely.
Yeah, that's excellent. Because these are touching all facets of our lives.
Right.
You can't ignore a whole segment of society just because
Right.
it's, convenient or something.
Yeah.
And then Zola asks kind of something that you brought up with some of the issues that, people were kind of double thinking, why is she doing this? What do you feel is your connection to the African American community, and how do you use that connection in your artwork?
Gorden can answer this for himself. I definitely I grew up in a very very white community and I hated it, and I hated the apathy, and I think that was why I sought out Emory in Atlanta, and I was trying to get involved in things that I thought mattered. But I've always my whole life had friends and mentors that are in Black and brown communities that have informed me of these issues, and I've been personally involved with them and care about them, like both the people and the issues. And I think ultimately the color of my skin is not up to me, but what I do with it is. So I have worked really really hard to get educated in this stuff and make the necessary connections in communities that ensure that I always am hearing what people in these communities have to say, and translating as much as I can the voices that I believe need to be heard, and continue to be an advocate as much as I can. But yeah, I think my connection is just as an advocate, and then Gorden, I'm sure, has a different answer.
Yeah, the question, Gordon, was the connection to the African American community and how we use those connections in our artwork.
From my perspective, as a 5-year-old or 4-year-old, I'll never forget the first time I saw the image of Emmett Till. And that had a significant impact on me as a very young child. And then, of course, I was born in 58, so I'm only 4 years younger than Ruby Bridges. And so I knew her story. And then, of course, the civil rights movement and, John F. Kennedy being shot. I was in kindergarten when that happened. It was just a lot of things that went on that had an impression as a little boy up until, teenage years and starting to understand, the country as it, in terms of African Americans and so on. So that had a lot to do with everything that I've done in terms of making it more satirical and empowering, because I didn't see a lot of media taking images and making them empowering for Black folks. Not at all, and still don't really see it. So that's why I took that vein. And to be honest with you, I did this image, or I came up with it, and thrust it onto Bria to bring it out and bring it to life. I did it as a anti Norman Rockwell image. It was everything that I saw in the original, nigger on the wall and the tomatoes and what she actually went through as a little girl. I see that. I look at me when I was 5. I didn't go through busing because of the area I lived in, but I saw it. I grew up in Palo Alto as a 5-year-old. My dad and mom used to work at Stanford University, and the busing didn't really hit our area. We didn't have it, busing. There just wasn't enough Black folks. I was the only Black kid there. Really. So they didn't bust me out to go to a Black school. I just stayed where I was anyway. But that was a part of what I was doing or trying to achieve with the empowerment and anti-Norman Rockwell. Because even when I presented it to my lawyer, because the first time you look at the image, anybody that knows the story of Ruby Bridges or busing, Brown v. Board of Education, they automatically see it. And there are those who don't, but they know Kamala, and then they draw the connection. But even my lawyer said, "Oh no, you can't do that." When she first saw the early drafts, and she said Norman Rockwell is going to get on you and this and that, and then she said, "But make these changes, and then we'll submit it for copyright." We made the changes. I told Bria, okay. She says, make these changes, and she'll submit it, and it went through. So it was an anti-Norman Rockwell, but then the Norman Rockwell Museum came back and they gave us some very positive comments. They said it does bridge the gap from then till now, and they're waiting on a statement from us now because they're re-releasing the image themselves. So
That's wonderful.
That it took a different turn than I even expected.
Sure. Sure. Well, while we still have Bria here, Gorden, can you kind of mention why it is that you decided to work with Bria in particular?
I could just see the freshness of her desire to learn more about me and what it is, my story, so to speak. Because I'm much older than her, and she wanted to learn more, I guess, the African American experience. She was enveloping all these things that I kept hitting her with, and she was just like, yeah, and it's just, I liked it. I liked her, and I was like, okay, and then she came back with her drafts so fast too. I was like, oh, she's quick too, she's very good. I think, okay, I'll see this in about a week or a few days. Boom, she was back in an hour or two. What do you think about that? What do you think about this? So yeah, and so it was just beautiful. I said, okay, Bria, you got it. Of course, when she first did it, Ruby Bridges was almost the same size as Kamala. So I said, hey, wait a minute, you got to make Ruby was 6, you got to shorten that shadow.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. It's neat to see that. So I know, Bria, you've got to go to another appointment. I'm going to put you on the spot if it's okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
We do art quotes every Monday from famous artists through history and contemporary artists. If you could leave my students with an art quote from Bria Goeller, what would it be?
Oh boy.
Word of wisdom to students, or about art, or anything.
I would say that's actually not that hard. I would say art is a door to empathy and should be used as a way of storytelling.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Well, I know you've got to go on, and Gordon's going to stay with me. And
yeah, I appreciate it. And sorry about that, but yeah, it's all you from now on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and good luck with everything. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Bria.
So Gordon, what was the inspiration? I know the inspiration for the image was, Ruby Bridges, but how did it kind of congeal in your head to do, these two connected in this way? That was a question
Well,
from my student Ruby also. Her name's Ruby.
yeah, it first started because I was staying on top of the hearings and the debates, and I saw how Kamala was really holding her own against these senior senators and uh, cabinet members, and she would make them all shudder. And I was like, she's fierce, in the hearings. And then I saw the debate, and this one was really stuck in my head. Her and Biden were going at it back and forth, just to think she's his vice president now. But they were talking about busing, and she made this statement, and it just really rang like a bolt of lightning to me when she replied to Biden by saying, "That little girl was me." That's her quote, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Wow, that little girl was her, growing up in Oakland, and being a little girl of color." And that stuck in my head for a couple of weeks, even before I met. And that's why I was trying to reach out to Saran Norris, because, like I said, he's one of the more recognized muralists up in the Bay. And, he does Bob's Burgers and all that stuff. But his colors, I love his colors that he uses. And I just, on a whim, because I was a caretaker for my dad, I got my brother to take care of my dad, who just passed away. Uh, we just buried him yesterday, actually. And I told my
Mm.
brother, look, I got to go meet. I didn't even have a meeting. I got to get up here because I got to talk to Saran because this thing was just bubbling in my head. You know, that little girl was me. Now, I wasn't thinking about Ruby at the time. I was just thinking about what Kamala said. So I wanted to do something positive for Kamala, that little girl, and connected with that statement. That little girl was me, and
Right.
that's how it evolved.
Oh, that's excellent. Was there, Ruby goes on to ask about, were there some emotional things that were connecting you to this image that you were hoping would be imparted through the artwork, like some emotional level message coming through? Was it just the power of Kamala or how Ruby opened doors for her in some way, or what was kind of the emotional thing, the emotional side of that?
As we started the steps of creating Kamala and Ruby just on paper without anything else, without any direction, I began to dig deeper into Ruby's story, and I was looking at the face, all the old photographs of the little 6-year-old, and that's when I started to draw more of a connection. When I saw the actual photos,
Right,
not
right.
the Norman Rockwell version of it, but the
Mhm.
photographs of the little girl, and with the marshals coming down I guess it was a courthouse step or school steps, I don't remember, but and I found a whole bunch, and I'm like, man, she had to be strong as a 6-year-old. And Kamala is strong, and that's when we kept going down that lane to say, okay, we got to draw this together.
Yeah.
And that's what I kept conveying to Bria, and she got it more and more every day we talked, and every day she did something with it, and I was like, okay, then it just magnified,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
it
then
sounds
she
like it wasn't.
and it grew within her as well, so she
Mhm.
put a lot of feelings into it as well. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it wasn't kind of this lightning bolt and you had the image. It was a process over time. And we talk about with our students that, the first thing that comes to your head is not necessarily that
Right,
you've got these iterations before you get there. So there was
right,
it sounds like there was a whole process involved in you
yeah.
getting to that final
Yeah,
image.
even the facial expressions of Kamala, you know, I say, no, I want her looking fierce and, going to take care of business. I mean, I use it in layman's terms, but she knew exactly what I was doing, and whatever she had to do with the art part of it, I was just giving her descriptions,
Right.
and then she'd come back and say, what about this and what about that? And I was like, yeah, okay, we're getting closer. you know,
Yeah.
yeah, she
She
had she
looked
had
determined in the image, that's for sure.
yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
let's put some high heels on her, because she does wear high heels. She had tennis shoes on her first, I think. But all these little changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to make her looking fierce, going to work and going to do a job, and she's going to be the beacon for a lot of people, and so on. Yeah.
How long do you feel like it was from the germination to this idea to the final image?
We started, I want to say, right around the beginning of September, up until we were almost complete by the end of September, which is when I brought in the lawyer to start looking at it,
Okay.
the copyright lawyer. And at that point, then the copyright lawyer said, okay, I want to see these changes before I put my signature on it. And we were into the 2 weeks of October when that was all complete with the copyright and everything. And the image was complete. The first week of October, made a few changes, and then we waited on the copyright. And then we put it up because I wanted to get it ready for her birthday, which was October 20th, as a way to introduce it online through social media. And on the wall, we put vote, and on the back behind her, we put happy birthday, Kamala. So that was a little tease that we introduced on the internet
Oh, neat.
with that image, yeah,
Yeah.
on
So
her
you
birthday.
bring up this the copyright issue, and this is something that art teachers struggle with their students because it's so easy to pull images off the internet, and we keep reiterating this idea that you don't want to steal images. It's
Right,
better if you're going to
right.
use a photo, use your own. So
Right.
can you speak a little bit about the importance of doing your research ahead of time and making sure you're okay with copyright?
Exactly. You need to know whether it's a photograph or something you're drawing. It has to be, if I remember some of the legal wording, is if it's a photograph and you're changing it, because I know I did the Muhammad Ali one, and I even talked to the photographer who took that image of Muhammad Ali, the iconic image of him over Sonny Liston. It has to be more than 50% redid
Okay.
if it's a photograph and in a satirical manner. I mean, it has other wording behind that process. But I still called the gentleman who actually took the photo. He lives in Brooklyn. He's in his 80s. Talked to him, and I talked to one of Muhammad Ali's last surviving family members, who's a lawyer in Louisville, who Ali actually sent to law school, and he's a lawyer. And then he called Ali's widow, and I asked them would they have a problem with it. They said no, do it. They liked it actually of Ali knocking out Donald Trump, and that put in different figures. Have you taken a close look at that? We have different. Bernie Sanders
I'm
is a
going to
photographer.
right after this.
Yeah, you got to look at the audience. Yeah, you got to look at
Yeah.
everybody in the audience. And he
Oh, that's
liked it.
awesome. Yeah,
And
but I
then,
like that, you're being able to speak to this because, teachers and students, we deal with this copyright thing and trying to
mhm,
instill the
mhm.
idea of fair use, within the work.
Now
Um,
there is a thin line. I mean, I
sure.
pushed the envelope. I mean, I even told my lawyer, I said, look, if you have a problem with this, I follow the Ronald Reagan quote. And she goes, well, what's that? I said, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission.
Yeah, I hear you there.
I'm pushing
Yep.
the envelope, so I was
Yep.
pushing the envelope, and I didn't mind. I don't care.
Yeah.
I wanted to push the envelope with regard to where we could go with this and what we could do legally.
Mhm.
And if it just hinged on being illegal, then they have to come back to me and tell me what part of it do you think we should change? Because I wanted to force their hand.
Yeah.
Then if you
Well,
don't
and
like this, huh?
yeah. Artists push boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was pushing the museum to come back and say, well, we don't want this or we don't like that. And then okay, once they tell me what they don't like, then good.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to hear, but they never came back and did that. They
Okay.
came back and said, we like it. We love the bridging between the past and the future. And it was, good. Now, one thing that Bria probably won't say, and you're an artist too, is that most artists don't like to push the envelope when it comes to political images.
Mm.
They don't want to cross the line because I don't know if it's a taboo thing due to, them trying to establish a career. They don't want to be stigmatized and so on. So, you always got to find the right artist that doesn't. Well, Bria just didn't know, so I was pushing her, and she just didn't. She didn't know any better.
Yeah. 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 You can alienate quite a bit of your audience,
Right,
certainly. Yeah.
right.
But you need to have the
Yeah,
courage to do that when you know
yeah,
it's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she didn't know, so I kind of took advantage of her in that regard. But she went from 500 followers on Instagram and getting commission work to 10,000 in 2 days. So now she has a voice. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, my other student, Philip, asked, is there a specific name for this piece?
yeah. That little girl was me.
That little girl was me. Okay.
Hmm.
Excellent. And then is there, there seems to be Melissa asked, there seems to be an obvious audience for this, but what is what is your view of the audience for this particular piece?
Where there were certain things that I didn't um, prepare for, and that was the younger generation. They really embraced it and then began to educate themselves on the shadow and the comments. Now, the older generation, like you said, uh, they cried. A lot of people have cried. I hear that from all over the world. You know, their fathers that want to get the poster just to put in their little girl's room. So I didn't expect all these other machinations that would
Mhm.
take place within people's hearts and within their minds from the image alone. I really didn't expect that. My goal was satire, make people happy, and empowerment. That was the main thing, three things. But it went beyond that, and it kind of makes me feel good.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
You touched my heart when I saw it, and I had to share it with my students. And
Hmm.
knowing what they were struggling with,
Hmm.
in their environment, and yeah, absolutely, it was very powerful. Shook me,
Hmm.
and I had to go out and reach out to Bria and you,
Hmm.
because my students really wanted to make a connection and learn some more.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we can educate, then that's a good thing as well. And the best way I can say it is a gentleman, I forget the country, which I got to pull up in his email. He said he just wanted to get this poster. He's in some small country near Africa. I can't remember, but I pull up the email. I'm going to buy it for him so he can put it in his little girl's room.
That's awesome.
That,
That's
that was the
awesome.
biggest. If I, forget all the accolades and everything, it's just, I'm going to send it to him
Yeah,
just to put it in his little girl's room. The
yeah,
poster. Yeah.
absolutely. Braden was asking, is there more work like this coming out in the future? Do you have any projects you're able to hint at or anything? Give us the scoop.
As long as he
at,
can keep it under
at
his hat,
Vernon, yeah, the
in
Vernon
the
Malone
next,
High School scoop.
we have a lot of images coming out, but we actually, in 6 months, we're moving to incorporate in our brand and on the site is a online podcast that's coming. That's in the works, and um, we're lining up everyone, the comedians and the people. It's going to be, kind of a twist on between Dave Chappelle,
Mhm.
Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, talking and having the same discussion on the street,
Okay,
meeting with people, whether you're right or left or center, we don't care. But we want to, whatever the topic is of the day, and it's to create dialogue and discussion.
excellent.
So we're moving
Excellent.
toward the podcast about 6 months from now,
Okay, all right. That's
5 months,
good to
somewhere in
know.
there. Yeah.
So I'd like to end with two more things.
Mhm.
One would be, what would your art quote be for, my art students?
Ah, what would my art quote be? Never listen to people tell you that it won't sell, it won't work, people won't understand it. Don't take that for granted. Go with what you believe in your heart, put it on paper, stand behind it to tell your story.
Hmm,
That would be
that's
it.
good. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. And then I guess the last thing would be, where can people go for more information? Like, where should we be looking on the internet or whatever for more? Is it just goodtrouble.com, or do you have some other places we could have students kind of
Um,
check out some more?
well, our website is being revamped. It's going to be a lot more user friendly and a lot more engaging, and that will be released on December 12th. So all those answers will be there. The website we have now was just something to get going at the beginning of October, but it's not what we want. It's not the message, and it's not user friendly. And but everything will be up on the 12th of December. So
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, Gordon. I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with my students
thank you.
virtually and
Yeah.
impart some wisdom. And they're going to be so excited to see this.
Okay. I hope I was a help.
Oh, absolutely. No, it was a
Okay.
joy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.